So good morning, everyone. Tuesday, January 24th, and it's the Senate Agricultural Committee meeting. And we have with us some guests from the State College or UVM's College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. And we got the dean, I believe, and the associate dean and director. And so it's good to have you folks with us, and we'll introduce ourselves, and then you can introduce yourselves, and we'll go from there. So,
I'm Brian Collmore, representing the Rutland District.
Irene Renner, representing Chittenden North, which also includes Fairfax and Franklin County.
Brian Campion, Bennington County, and the towns of Wilmington and Londonderry.
I'm Rich Weston, Wyoming.
And I'm Bobby Starr, and I represent Orleans, the bulk of Orleans County. So welcome, and some of us visited UVM earlier this year and went through the greenhouses, and it's quite a nice visit we had up there that day. So you were there.
Yeah, I was there.
Yeah.
Very impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so maybe you could give us an overview of what's transpiring there and how things are going.
I would love to do that, and I have a PowerPoint here to share. Let's see, I need to share my screen.
She
here.
said to go on the screen.
Yes, she is. She's screen. This one. Okay.
Oh, beautiful. Doesn't look like it is today.
Would it be better if I sit here or stand? and
No,
talk?
no, you're fine.
Well,
Sit right down if you want, unless you want to stand.
I'll try sitting and see how that works, but good morning, everyone. I'm so glad to be here. As mentioned, my name is Leslie Parisi. I'm the Dean of the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences at UVM, or CALS, as we affectionately call the college. And I and my colleague, Roy Beckford, who's Director of UVM Extension, are thrilled to tell you about our college and what we're all about. And I hope by the end of this that you are so excited about UVM and CALS that you're ready to send your kids and your grandkids and your neighbor kids to UVM or other Vermont institutions.
Yeah.
So I've got to say, I moved here about 2.5 years ago. We're both transplants to Vermont. I moved here about 2.5 years ago from University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Love that institution. But I've got to say, UVM is a very special place, and we just love, love, love being in Vermont.
Well, that's a good introduction.
And so what I'd like to do this morning is tell you about our mission, a little bit about who we are, and I'm going to spend most of my time talking about our agricultural programs and research. So this is a mission statement that we developed a shortened version of with all our faculty and staff, and is to deliver collaborative, transformative research, academics, and outreach that create critical thinkers to build resilient, inclusive, and healthy communities and environments. And you notice the word agriculture is not in there, but that is because we are so broad, and in order to have healthy communities and environments, we need robust agriculture and a wonderful working landscape and all that goes along with it. So there's a lot packed into that mission. Our vision is that we envision a college that moves society continuously towards science-informed decisions to help our community and environments thrive. And science-informed is really important to us. And I would say if you ever have questions that come before you where you need some science experts, please reach out to us. That's what part of what we're here for. One of our taglines is that we are cells to society, because we have some professors and students studying cells in a petri dish and under a microscope, whether they're plant cells or human cells or viruses, all the way up to human societies. So we're a very broad college, which is part of the excitement. And a little bit about us by the numbers. We have close to 1,600 students. Most of them are undergraduates, about 1,400, and the rest are either students studying for their master's or their PhD. We have about 17 postdoctoral associates, and that is growing. Our undergraduates can choose between 13 different undergraduate majors and 19 minors. We have 6 academic departments. We're close to $50 million in extramural research funding, which puts us second at UVM only to our College of Medicine. So we're doing quite well in terms of research dollars. We've got 5 offsite research and teaching facilities that I'll tell you more about. We have 11 extension field offices, which I'm going to leave to my colleague Roy. And the number of faculty is always changing because we have retirements and new hiring, but it's somewhere 90 plus faculty across our academic units and extension, and about 180 staff.
Now,
Go ahead.
could you handle more students than the 1570, or is that pretty well?
That's a
filled?
really good question. In terms of our undergraduate population, I understand that we're reaching we are a residential campus for our undergraduates. And so my understanding is that we're reaching a maximum there, but we do have more online programs that can grow and other types of offerings. So we can increase the numbers in other ways as well. And we're definitely growing our graduate programs, especially our PhD programs. And I understand President Yaramella was here with you last week, and he may have mentioned some of that.
Yeah.
Where are the off-site facilities?
Oh, I'll get to that.
Okay.
You're prepping me for.
Good.
Yes, I've got slides to address that. This is our leadership team. Let me move this. So of course I'm the dean, and I bet because Vermont is a small state, you know some of these names. So Jane Kolodinsky is our associate dean for research. She's very enthusiastic about hemp and the use of industrial hemp for various products. Kate Finley Woodruff is our associate dean for student services and a big ag enthusiast. And you're shaking your
I
head.
work a lot with her on the 2+2 program.
Yes. Steph Diane is our assistant dean for business operations, and Roy Beckford right here is our associate dean and director of UVM Extension. And then we have a host of department chairs and center directors. So the departments and units that make up the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences are, we have Department of Animal and Veterinary Sciences, Community Development and Applied Economics, a new food systems research center that I'm going to tell you a little bit about. A Department of Microbiology and Molecular Genetics, and I've got an asterisk next to that department because that department is actually in our College of Medicine, but all their undergraduate teaching is in our college, and so they're wonderful partners with us. We also have a Department of Nutrition and Food Sciences, Plant Biology, Plant and Soil Sciences, and of course UVM Extension. If I can minimize this. Yes, I can. So we, in our animal science major, we have a number of concentrations such as pre-vet program, dairy management, equine science, zoo, exotic and companion animals, and some of the key words that come up around the scholarship in our animal science department are things like forage and pasture management, genetics, our cream program, which I'll talk a little bit about. Our undergraduates can also major in nutrition and food sciences and concentrate either in dietetics, food science, or nutrition, society, and sustainability. And some of the keywords around this area of study include global food safety, farm to table, fermentation, dietetics, and more. In our plant and soil science, students can choose to concentrate on agroecology or landscape design, potentially minor in soil science, and some of the keywords around these areas of studies include horticulture, agroecology, soil health, agronomy. And then-
Do you, do you do a lot in educating students of the soil health? Because we're putting quite a lot of money in through the ag agency into trying to build better soils on our farms. Of course, we run off for reclaimed water. So you
Yeah,
have quite a
so
few.
especially our plant and soil science department has soil experts, and I want to say, before I forget to say, we have so many ongoing collaborations with our UVM extension between our academic departments and extension. And even though I've been here only 2.5 years, I get a sense that we have more collaborations ongoing now than ever before. So people like Heather Darby, she's an agronomist, and others in extension. And then we have people like Deb Nair in our plant and soil science, and others who are soil scientists working together on projects.
Yeah.
So yes, and Josh Faulkner, yes, I even have a picture of him somewhere in here. For our students who are interested in focusing more on the molecular level, they can major in microbiology, molecular genetics, biochemistry, and biological sciences. And some of the things that they can focus on are things like cancer research, global health, infectious disease, vaccines, COVID. So a lot going on there. So they can choose a pre-med or a science route and go into either industry or academia. We have a plant biology department, and some of their interests, they're really big on biodiversity and the loss of biodiversity, which is occurring because of climate change. They study everything from the function of roots to ferns. They have a fantastic herbarium facility with thousands of samples of plants from Vermont in the region, and they're accessed by researchers around the world. So really fantastic facility. And then we have a Department of Community Development and Applied Economics. And this is more of a social science department that really kind of ties a lot together. So our students have a wide choice of majors in CDAE, that's how we abbreviate that department, like community and international development, community entrepreneurship, community-centered design, public communications, food systems, and they can even do a self-design major. And some of the key words for them are things like sustainable development, green building, again, farm to table. So they do a lot. And one of your interns here is very interested potentially in this department. He's watching remotely. So I wanted to give this, I think from talking to him, I think this department sounds of special interest to him. I want to start talking about the new Food Systems Research Center at UVM, but before I do that, are there any questions about what I've just talked about? And do stop me along the way.
On the pre-vet, they go on to Cornell or some other vet school to finish up their degree. Is
Right, we don't have a veterinary school at UVM, but we do have articulation or agreements with other schools like Tufts University.
Tufts,
So
yeah.
a special arrangement with them where our students can get, if they do have a certain GPA, they can get in quite easily to Tufts. And even some sites in Scotland, so Glasgow and Edinburgh. But the students can apply wherever, and we have a really awesome acceptance rate into veterinary school of over 90%, which is quite good.
yeah. Have you noticed at UVM, it seems like to me from an observer, there's quite a few more females going into veterinarian than there to be a vet than there are males. Is that accurate or?
It is, and I gotta say, I'm old enough that I remember a time when women were discouraged from large animal veterinary science, and that has totally changed. So yeah, and in general, UVM has more women than men, but that's not uncommon. That's a trend that's happened across the country. And,
Yeah.
we need to right the balance a little bit. But.
Yeah. And of course, we've heard here in Vermont that we have a shortage of large animal vets in some areas. And, I think we offer loans, forgivable loans to young vets that they'll go in a particular area to practice. And so, we're doing things to try to encourage them to come.
And we also have a new 2+2 program with BTC around veterinary science.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
And if I may, the life sciences part of the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences actually adds some value added to people's lives and livelihoods. Because it's not just about finding money to live in a particular place, but it's about the potential to associate with other people, to find a spouse, that kind of thing. That's what Vermont is beginning to offer through the life sciences part of the college.
Yeah,
And that's important too, the holistic
community.
appeal to people's lives.
So well-rounded, Irene.
If I may, I've heard this 2+2 program referenced. I guess there was an old one and now there's a new one. Could someone
there's
define that for me? Okay, I don't know what that is yet.
Well, they add more courses to what's available to students.
And part of it is that students can start at BTC in either dairy sciences or.
So it's 2 years
veterinary.
plus 2 years. That's
And then
that's
if
what
they
it is,
choose
so.
to, they can switch over to UVM for the last 2 years.
Thank you.
And we pick up the tuition costs. That program is probably, it's gonna be getting along 25 years old.
Thank you.
Brian?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. You know how in medicine and dental, we kind of are starting to allow non-doctors and non-dentists to do certain kinds of things. Do we do that in any way in terms of veterinarian science? So if we have a shortage of large animal folks, vets, can folks that leave some of these programs do some of the services on a horse or on a, does that make sense?
So, yeah,
You know,
and so.
you know what I'm getting at?
My
You know?
understanding is they could be
Yeah,
a
oh,
vet tech,
okay.
a vet tech, yes.
Okay, so if I had a problem with a horse, the vet tech could come and they could do certain kinds of
I
things
think so.
at the barn. Okay,
Yes.
okay.
And our students learn a lot of that, and I'll talk more about that
Okay.
as soon as I tell you about our new food systems
Yeah.
research center. So we have
Thank
this
you.
exciting new partnership with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, a specific division called ARS, which stands for Agriculture Research Service. And let me tell you about it. So this new collaboration is focused on small and medium-sized farms and food systems characteristic of Vermont. Thanks to Senator Leahy, an appropriation about $10 million comes down every year, and it is shared between the government with their operations on campus and our college. Now, I'll explain more of this on the next slide. So this 10 million, well, first of all, it's taxed off the top somehow. Some of it goes back into the government. So it ends up about 8 million, but I'm not complaining. And it is split such that it funds both government ARS research unit and the collaborative UVM Food Systems Research Center on campus. So how are we partnering? So the college receives 50% of this appropriation, and the government, ARS at UVM, receives the other 50%. And then our UVM scientists operate in a new entity called the UVM Food Systems Research Center, or FSRC. The government scientists on campus operate within what they call, it's not a very exciting name, but it is ARS Research Unit. So it turns out that the government has ARS, or Agriculture Research Service, research units all across the country, every state across the country. There had not been one, at least that we know of, in Vermont until recently.
Now, these are USDA employees.
Yes,
And
yes,
they do research at UVM as well.
right. So at other ARS across the country, many are associated with universities and on campuses. Some ARS research units are standalone units, not associated with the university. But the USDA did want to develop a different type of model, because even when some units were on university campuses, they found that they operated as silos, and they didn't want that. So for us, they decided that they wanted this new model, very collaborative, And so far, I've got to say, it's working wonderfully. So we just hired a new director for our Food Systems Research Center on the university side. Her name is Polly Erickson. She just arrived in December from Kenya. So she was the head of an international livestock research program that gave out millions of dollars around the globe. And she's a big name in food systems. So she is our new director. Meredith Niles, a name you might know, is the associate director of our Food Systems Research Center. So they're on the UVM side and working with me. And then Dr. Chris Peters was hired by the government from Tufts University to be the director of the government ARS research unit. So he is currently on campus. He is hiring scientists for the government ARS research unit, but the three of these individuals, Polly, Meredith, and Chris, work together to co-create high impact programming. And
Now, what type of research do they,
I'm going to show you. It's coming.
it's coming.
Yes. And I would strongly encourage you to get the three of them in here to meet with you sometime. Now, Polly is still, she's drinking from the proverbial fire hose because she's so new at this, but maybe in a few months or next year or something, it'd be fun to.
Meredith and Chris are pretty well tuned into it.
They are, and Polly, she's a quick learner, so she'll say give her another month or so. But so what type of research has been funded or will be funded to date? Some examples are shown here. We've given research funding out around food and farm sustainability metrics, the impact of COVID-19 on our food systems, sustainable dairy systems, some equipment funding, a new program that will be funded around the impact of genetics and environmental management on nutrition in Northeast food products. We've given out well, this is slightly out of date, probably 2.5 million or more research funding to more than 100 people, not just to departments in the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, but this money has gone out to other colleges at UVM as well as some external organizations. And so some of the people who have been funded are, for example, Joshua Faulkner and Heather Darby, who are in UVM Extension and other scientists here.
We usually have Heather Darby and, sometimes a couple of times a year.
I figured you knew Heather. She's
Yeah.
quite a dynamo.
We worked with her on a task force this past year.
So some of this funding has gone to our trainees because we need to create the next generation of scientists. After all, we are a university and we want the next generation of extension agents as well. So some of the money coming through the Food Systems Research Center has helped to fund at least 8 PhD fellows, so students who are working towards their doctorate degree, but working in the area of food systems. 10 undergraduates were funded last year to do research around food systems. We're supporting 9+ postdoctoral fellows. So these are people who already have their PhD, but they don't have a faculty position yet. They're in further training. And we've supported close to $1 million or over $1 million in training for these. And that type of thing is going to continue. Well, and then I'm going to move on to our other facilities because somebody was asking earlier, what other facilities do we have? But before I leave our Food Systems Research Center, are there any more questions around that?
Well, of course, we play a pretty big part in our Vermont state food systems for our schools and institutions, and trying to get healthier foods into our school meals and getting more students to eat a good meal at lunchtime plus breakfast even. So that that's good that we have people coming along. Now, will they work in the nutritional areas for food values or new foods?
So nutrition and new foods is certainly a part of this. So it's quite broad, as long as it has something to do with food systems in Vermont and the Northeast. So the answer is yes. And I will say, we're still growing out the center. So the government is still hiring their scientists. They're gonna hire 8 total scientists to lead laboratories and research programs. And we are hiring more people. And we're gonna be doing more outreach to the communities across Vermont, but we're still in the building stage. So that's coming.
Irene?
Would either of you be able to give me an example of what a food system in Vermont would be?
So it's everything from producing the food to getting the food to
Gosh.
market, to consuming the food, to disposing of the food, to recycling it back, and it's this whole cycle. But for example, during the early days of COVID, you may recall how some of our food systems across the country broke down because a lot of large manufacturers were sending food to schools which were closed or restaurants which were closed, and yet sometimes local grocery stores didn't have enough. And that was a food systems shortfall. And some of that happened in Vermont, but then there were also some robust responses in Vermont where farmers who had websites or who were able to set up websites and online sales, some of them saw their sales skyrocket. And so what can we, part of this is what can we learn from things like that to make a more robust food system that's also better for the environment.
So there are systems within systems, right? Like dairy might be a system
Yes.
within the larger part of the table.
Yes.
Another
Yes.
example might be maple. So think about climate change impact on sap flow,
Right.
all the way through to the syrup after they appear on your tabletop.
And I'm gonna get to maple too. Okay. All right.
The issue that it's coming up next this morning, no, I guess not this morning, but it's coming up later, maybe this week, are food hubs and how they're being operated and how they could become more efficient, getting food packaged and ready to go to consumers. And those consumers that we're talking about is our schools and our institutions. But I think, we have a lot of excellent farmland in Vermont. And if we had enough growers, we could get into the Boston and Hartford, maybe Philadelphia areas to supply in them rather than trucking food all the way across the country, say from California.
Well, you're gonna be, I think, interested in one of my upcoming slides, and that speaks right to that
Oh.
point.
Well,
So you're
that's good,
preempting me
we're
here.
on the same
We
page.
are. All right, so we have a number of facilities outside of the main UVM campus that are very important for agriculture programs, education, and research. So one is the Paul Miller Research Complex in South Burlington off Spear Street. Also part of that facility is the Heartache Equine Center, and that facility is also called the University Farm. We have the UVM Horticulture Research and Education Center, also in South Burlington. So you'll sometimes hear it referred to as HREC, or affectionately the Hort Farm.
Yeah.
A lot of agriculture activities go on there. There's a UVM Bioresearch Complex on Spear Street in South Burlington. And then getting outside of the Burlington, South Burlington area, we have the Proctor Maple Research Center in Underhill, the Morgan Horse Farm in Weybridge, and then all these extension offices on leave for Roy. But I just want to go quickly through these facilities to show you what they're up to. So at the Miller Farm on Spear Street, the University Farm, we are very proud of the cream program that we have there. This is a student-run dairy farm for undergraduates. It takes 16 to 25 students per year. Often these are pre-vet students, but they don't have to be, and they don't even have to be from our college. Students can apply from other colleges at UVM, and the students who get into this program, oh my God, they love the cows and they love dairy, and they get to work with among the highest milk producing herds in Vermont. We work in cooperation with Cabot Creamery. They take the milk, it gets sent here and there, turned into ice cream and sold back at the dairy bar at UVM. And it's a really wonderful experiential learning opportunity for these students where they get to hook the cows up for the milking and the management, and they decide on the breeding with help, of course. They participate in calving. So at 3 a.m., if there's a calving happening, they're out there. So it's amazing, and these are really passionate students. We have the, at the same facility, the Hardacre Equine Center. Now, if you drive down Spear Street, you will always see horses in the fields because we have 12 pastures for them. But this picture, I noticed somebody sent me the slide and it's like no horses there, but I think it was the rainbow in the picture that they were really enamored with. So we have 22 stall barn, the pastures, indoor and outdoor arenas, etc. And students can learn about equine science, even if they've never ridden a horse or been around a horse before. And some students choose to board the horses here as well, if they have horses. All right, now I'm moving on to another facility. This is HREC, or the Hort Farm in South Burlington. So Bobby here, or Senator Starr, we have a farmer training program that occurs every summer. And this is a wonderful program. And I know you can't read all the skills and knowledge that these students learn, but they learn a lot. So students from Vermont and other states can sign up and learn how to be farmers. Terry Bradshaw, who's pictured in the bottom right here, is the director of the program, and he has a wonderful staff who he works with. I was at the most recent graduation ceremony for these students. They have wonderful, fun graduation events, but they work really hard all summer long, and they learn how to be sustainable
So they-
farmers. And they learn the business of farming and the production. And
How long a course is that? Is it a certain number of weeks or
I believe it's many weeks during the summer, but I don't have the exact
yeah,
number.
Or 8 weeks or so.
8 sounds like a good guess. We'll go with that.
It's a great idea.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I imagine you could get people from all over the country,
Oh, yeah.
all over the world, right?
Well, I was talking to
Great.
a relative of my daughter-in-law, and that relative lives in Oklahoma, and he had heard about this program. He's setting up a farm, and he was talking about potentially taking
It's
it.
a great idea.
So yes. Also at the Hort Farm, some of the operations of the Vermont Bee Lab take place there, and this is a lab that's focused on research and outreach dedicated to protect pollinators. They offer diagnostic services for beekeepers. They collaborate with other beekeeping communities or groups across the state, and they have 6 drop-off points where people can put their live or dead bees that are having problems. They'll be analyzed, and the results are reported back. It helps with best beekeeping practices, and they keep a record for the state of Vermont, what's going on with our pollinators. So Samantha Alger runs this.
We used to do, well, we still hear from him, but we used to work a lot with Bill Mears from UVM. I think he's retired, a retired professor maybe now on pollinators and
Right. And I ran into the premieres months ago. I can't remember exactly where. It might have been in Rimouski, but it was a delightful conversation. We do have a new person who's focusing on pollinator work across the board, not just honeybees, but all pollinators.
pollinators, yeah. That's, well, pretty important.
Yes, it is. So some of the research that is going on at the Hort Farm involves agrovoltaics, and this is led by Margaret Skinner and Bruce Parker. And so what agrovoltaics is a combination of agriculture with solar panels to grow crops in between them in very creative ways. And I'll show you on the next slide how this might look. But one of the crops that Margaret Skinner, well, here's some crops are going to test initially in agrovoltaics, and this is a collaboration with iSun, which is a Vermont company producing solar panels. And one of the crops that Margaret Skinner is especially interested in is that little flower at the bottom of the picture there, and that's saffron. Saffron is a very high value added crop. It's very, very expensive. However, it's also expensive to harvest because you have to do so by hand, but it grows well in Vermont, and Margaret wants to see if that and other crops grow well with this concept. So what this might look like, these aren't iSun's panels, this is another company in Germany, but it might look something like this, where they have these solar panels and crops are growing in between. They want to determine how to best do this. This is a value added for the farmer, just having these solar panels, because it provides electricity for them and that they can potentially use or sell. And so this is just getting started at the Hort Farm. And if you haven't been there, I'd encourage you to visit this or any of our facilities.
Now, are those vertical, those panels, or are they tilt, or do they tilt?
So they haven't been, iSun's panels haven't been set up yet, quite yet. It's coming. So I think it will look something like this, but I'm not sure. You'll have to come out and visit, take a look.
Yeah, well, wouldn't want to today, but maybe,
No,
maybe next spring it would be a fun thing to do.
absolutely. So Margaret Skinner is also, she's an entomologist, and I hope I'm not gonna overstep with what you're gonna say, but she's an example of, we have a number of our professors who have appointments in academic departments in the college. So Margaret has an appointment as a research professor in our plant and soil science department, but she's also an entomologist with UVM Extension. And she has a big interest in ticks, and I will say, when I moved from North Carolina to Vermont, I thought I wasn't gonna have to worry about ticks anymore, but with global warming, they're here, and they're in
Yeah.
sugar bushes, and they've decimated the deer population in this area, which is really sad. The moose, I meant to say moose. Thank you, Roy. The moose, and I haven't seen a moose yet since I've been to Vermont.
You gotta come to the kingdom to see me.
I was in the kingdom a year ago, and I didn't see any moose there
No.
either. But maybe I didn't spend long enough there.
The herd or the animal numbers, I think, are way down because of that little bug.
Yeah. So the mention of sugar bush allows me to transition to. Get rid of that. What did I do here? Okay. No, I'm trying, okay, I'm good now. All right, want to talk about fantastic facility that UVM has operated for 75 years. They just celebrated their 75th anniversary in 2022, and that's the UVM Proctor Maple Research Center. This is the best maple research center in the country. They have done so much for maple production and quality in Vermont and beyond. It's run by Dr. Tim Perkins and Dr. Abby Vandenberg. And here's another example of our collaboration with UVM Extension, where Mark Iselhart, who is an extension maple specialist, and he works with this team as well. They do research around increasing the productivity and profitability of maple production, the ecophysiology of maple production, and they do a lot with the chemistry and flavor of maple syrup. And if you haven't visited this facility, this is another must see. You can taste the different samples of maple. Some are off and some are good, and I will say the off samples even tasted good to me.
Well, after eating log cabin, I
Yeah.
mean, most anything would taste better.
And the final facility that I wanted to mention is the UVM Morgan Horse Farm. This is really a national treasure. It's a national historic site. They've been breeding Morgan horses here for going on 140 years. UVM acquired this facility from the government in 1951, so they maintained a Vermont state animal, and I hope you all knew that it's the Morgan horse. The property is gorgeous. So again, if you haven't been there, you must visit. They're open to the public from May to October, but for senators, I'm sure we can have you visit anytime you want. Margot Smithson runs it, and she is fantastic and has a wonderful group of people helping her. But
Yeah, where is that?
it's in Waybridge.
Waybridge.
Waybridge, yeah.
We started there.
See, I've never been
No?
to Waybridge.
I'd love to go. I'd love to go, yeah.
Oh, my
I've
gosh.
never been either.
Okay,
So
well,
where do
let's
you
get
think
you all out
we're
there.
gonna tour all spring? I mean,
And they
We're keeping
have
a list.
a Vermont Day every August, but they have programs, they work, especially with our Department of Animal and Veterinary Sciences, as you might imagine, but they also work with other colleges as well, and they have apprentice and equine programs and internships. They're working with Extension on agritourism. They do a lot of historic preservation, of course, of the breed, so they continue to breed the horses out there, but they also preserve the building and the artifacts and
Looks
cetera.
nice.
Forestry and place-based
Are you
education.
gonna increase their appropriation this year in the budget 100%?
I can't. One reason I've never gone there. Because we only give that facility $1. And I figure
I thought he was
that's all
gonna
it's
make a
worth
motion to
is
make it
$1. Can't be worth a whole lot.
Well, maybe we can change that because it is really,
Well, yeah, it's
incredible, but-
beautiful. No, I was just kidding about the $1.
No, well, if we do only give.
Yeah, it
$1,
is. It's in there.
that's-
That's what it says.
Yeah, we ought to increase that by 100%.
Yeah, it's a 2.
well, I will tell you, we would very much appreciate it because we are having to look at different business models.
Yeah, percent.
And then that's my last slide before I turn things over to Roy. So any questions? That you haven't asked
No,
yet.
but we may have some as, as we move forward here this morning.
All right, or you can pepper Roy with all the questions I can get his.
Just to make sure, Linda, I want to check in with you in terms of time. I want to make sure that we're at time.
Yeah, we have until 11.
Oh, 11, okay. All right. Well, so first of all, I want to say thank you, Senator Stark, for the warm greeting you had for me on the occasions that we've met. When we met at Champlain Valley Expo,
Yeah,
you were very kind, very warm. And in the previous times, I had one call in last year to the Senate committee, and that was also very, very nice. Well, thank you. Thanks to everybody else who were there. But I remember Senator Starr because he showed up at the expo, and he was one of the inductees in the Hall of Fame.
yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, that's great.
And
I
I was
got rejected though.
What's that?
They didn't vote it through.
I want to point out that I was very, very proud that Extension is a sponsor of that event.
Yes.
So I want to make sure that. Did I lose my presentation? Okay.
No, that was a nice occasion that day.
Yeah. All right, so I won't be very long, and I've also provided to Linda everything I've written in these slides. I also provided in narrative form, so that you can just take the two-page document, take a look at it, see everything I've written down in these slides. You can take it around, you can read it afterwards. So let me just quickly back up and talk a little bit about history. In the 1800s, there was a potato famine in Ireland that led the English to look at how to diversify the staple food that the Irish ate, potatoes. There was only one variety of potatoes available in Ireland at the time. And of course, potatoes came from the New World. And they realized that the reason there was a serious Phytophthora rot potatoes was that this particular variety was susceptible to Phytophthora.
That's the bacteria, is that what?
It's a fungus.
It's a fungus, okay.
All right. And so the idea that the British came up with is how do we diversify and create some kind of system where we educate all the farmers around Ireland and elsewhere about how to change their crop up, grow different varieties and so on. The outreach, all that intensity of exploration around finding new varieties and so on became known as extension. And so the word took on a new meaning in the English language. And the United States adopted that idea later on. And so the Extension Service, which officially began in law in 1914, was basically an extension, pun intended, of that whole idea. So there are people, ask all the time, well, what is extension? What is it? Essentially, it's just a trend in that kind of idea. UVM Extension actually started a year before extension starts in the rest of the country. Vermont is always being a pioneer in these issues. We started in 1913. The Smith-Lever Act, the Smith-Lever Act was in 1914. And so UVM extension has been around quite a while and has served these people well. I believe that all the development you see in agriculture in particular, and certainly all the other supporting frameworks, is as a consequence of the work of UVM through its extension service. So the idea is that our mission is cultivating healthy communities, as simple as that, cultivating healthy communities. I heard that this was actually established some years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. They paid a consultant to come up with this jargon, this mission, cultivating healthy communities. And I think it's good. That whatever that was is really good. I like very small, very, not too many,
Precise.
exactly, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I can actually gather the herd extension around this kind of mission statement, cultivating other communities, because that's really what it is. And I think Cal's mission adheres to that kind of framework also, in that regard. So I'm going to read this, and I won't read other slides because I won't be very, very
So
long.
we don't have it up there.
No?
We don't. I just want to make sure that.
You're right. We
Uh,
must have stopped sharing the
Because you
screen.
could put it up there.
Or we could probably have it online or whatever.
I don't know what happened.
I'm sorry, you want me to put it on?
Yes,
Yes.
go ahead and do that, because I don't know what happened.
Fine, we're shared. Yeah.
But the potato story was great. It was really interesting. I mean, that, how do you
How it
start
got
to?
started.
Yeah.
Talk about food systems
Yeah.
failure.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have IT failures every day here.
I apologize for that. I don't know what happened here. Maybe
Yeah.
my-
So you want the cultivating health communities one?
Yes.
Oh, you don't want the narrative, you want the slideshow, sorry.
Let me see if I do. Is it sharing now? I
There we
think
go.
it's-
Oh, there we go.
Yeah,
Perfect.
I don't know. I really don't know what happened, but anyways. So,
those are the different, your county offices.
right, so UVM Extension has 11 offices around the state, and the state office at Murray Hall takes 12. And so they're depicted, and you see that where we have presence throughout the whole state of Vermont. And this is interesting because when Extension was established in 1914, the idea was that there would be a true collaborative between the federal government, state government, and county government. And for a long time, Extension in Vermont had what's referred to as the cooperative model, cooperative extension, which means a true state, federal, and county. We have no county governance, however. No. And so that actually dissolved, I think, sometime in the 1980s or early 90s. But we still kept presence in many of our counties through proximity and through the spread of our extension educators, formerly called agents, throughout the whole state. And so we give service to everyone regardless. We do pay to rent property in all of these places, except Murray Hall.
So conservation districts, I think, work hand in hand with,
Yeah, sometimes we share,
same building, right?
sometimes we share, yeah, and we also with
Even
agency.
Moore Hall, we pay a tax back to
Yeah, we do
university
pay.
for our space.
Yeah, not just conservation, but also agencies of, and sometimes the forestry and so on. We do have foresters present there, and we kind of share that. But just kind of wanted to see that depiction. We have several units in extension, and this is not all of them. And then within each of these boxes that you see there, there are also subunits that do a lot of work around that theme. So 4-H and Families, for example, and a number of other subunits that will do different things for different age groups, for parents and so on and so forth. So you look at any one of that, it's also splintered down into very effective subunits that serve the populace of Vermont. And the output from these units, how we actually reach into the community, is through seminars, workshops, presentations, similar things to the farmer training that Dr. Parisi just talked about. Short courses, in-depth education events, single consultation. These are some of the strongest type of outreach that we do, where we actually go to whether the people are producers or otherwise, and talk about how to do things, how to get things done properly. That's why we need not just staff people at the master's degree level, but we need faculty who are PhD level, who can do the research, do the applied research, and apply that technology or that approach on the farmers' fields.
I know Heather Darby, she does a lot of work up north.
Yes,
And it's remarkable the work that
absolutely.
she's done with plants and growing our own grains, you know, what would grow the best and survive here in Vermont. And water quality been a big help and she works through the extension.
Right, and I know you know the work that she does. We have a whole new crop of extension folk who are coming up, who are gonna do similar things. And they were already started. Joshua Faulkner is a good example.
Yeah.
Vern Grubinger also.
Yeah, Vern's down south and.
Absolutely. There's a whole number of people who are in extension who are doing similar type of work. And you'll hear more as time goes by. But long-term consultations, business plans, because we want to make farmers understand the concept of business. Publications, all kinds of guides and teaching tools that we use as outputs to reach our stakeholders. How is extension funded? I talked about the cooperative approach earlier. The Smith-Lever Fund, the Smith-Lever Act funds extension. So we do get some of our monies from the federal government. And then there's another piece that comes to us called Smith-Lever Special Needs. It's not a lot of money, but it kind of helps to identify special needs in our community, and we help people that way through servicing that way. Also, the FNET, the Expanded Food and Nutrition Education Program. We'll also get some funding for that. Some people refer to this as a food stamp type program or education, because when people get food stamps, they need to know how to spend that money, what to buy that gives the best bang for the buck. And then REA is a natural resources fund that supports Maple, technical work in Maple in the state of Vermont. And then we get general funds because the state also provides a match, and this is really what that is. And then grants, we do our staff actually pursue grant funding in some really ingenious ways. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And then we have some income, fees for service, small amount of that, and also gifts and endowments, which are one of the things I would like to see grow significantly in extension. So to take a look at this same thing through in a different way, take a look at, for example, our grants in 2012, and look what it is in 2022. And if you look at the share of all the other funds, you'll realize that they're actually decreasing while our grant funding is increasing, because inflation and other impacts on the amount of money we get has taken a toll, but our folks have gotten to the point where they understand fully well that we need to serve the state of Vermont.
See, that maybe it's 23, that 23, you should have had a pretty sizable increase in your general fund. But
What is that? Not sure.
well, we gave the university like $10 million instead of 5 maybe. And which we go
No,
on,
we increased their overall funding by 10 million.
Yeah.
In
in extension, the College of Ag gets 25% of that, isn't it? Or,
No, normally we would, but I think that was not part of that,
pardon?
not for that 10 million.
Well, that was base funding. So we increased the base funding by $10 million. So that will be in the budget again this year. So
All right, yeah, so we'll work with the rest of the university to see how that goes. But that is good news.
So-
Rich and I are both on appropriations. That's how we kind of keep an eye on some of that stuff.
So
Brian?
I'm just wondering, so what we're talking about, the 34% to the 21%, so that could just be, correct me if I'm wrong, just the way that the university itself is deciding to fund the extension. Is that correct, possibly?
34%?
Yeah, to the
On the
21%.
general fund.
That's 10 years. That, we didn't,
Right,
we
right,
didn't
right.
keep up,
Yeah, okay,
Right.
you know, we
yeah.
didn't keep up with the appropriation.
But the federal government hasn't done it either.
No, they haven't done well either.
Right, there you go. But anyways, I believe that with a group like yourself, you paying attention to these issues, I believe that some good will come of it.
Yeah.
Let me give you some quick updates, and this is what I'm gonna spend the next 5 minutes or so on. In 2022, we celebrated 75 years of the Proctor Maple Research Center. I think Leslie talked about that, and I just wanna say that Maple extension work around Maple that we do continue to be integral in maintaining and improving Vermont's comparative and competitive advantage in maple syrup production. Here's what I want to say. The state of Vermont has comparative advantage in maple, and we need to maintain that. We're better than our closest rivals, far better than them by significant percentage. And we want to make sure that we continue to do that to establish that hegemony over Cornell, for example, who in the state of New York has begun to put a bunch of money into maple.
Trying to catch
Maple
up
research
or
is so
to buy it.
Right. So I think that our maple extension work has to actually be renewed, and more focus needs to be on that, because we can't afford to lose our position, our competitive or comparative edge.
Is Cornell University still open? We have an alum right here.
Go Big Red.
Vermont has some of the, or the strictest rules in the country on maple quality. And the Proctor Maple Research Center studied maple samples from across the country.
Right.
Some of them have mold in them and other
Oh,
stuff.
really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but Vermont really.
We kind of
takes a tab
lead
on
the way.
But we will let them know. Well, that's the whole approach here.
Yeah.
Something of interest to you, Senator Starr, is transitions in the Middlebury Extension Office. In the last 6 months or so, we continue to commit to agronomy and water quality work in the Champlain Valley. And we're sustaining our support for the Champlain Valley Farm Coalition. We've rehired for that agronomy specialist position.
Oh, great.
And not only did we do that, but we hired a second person in soil health and water quality outreach. So for the one person who left, for Cornell, by the way, we've hired two in that one person's place. And we have an active search for the agronomy faculty, Jess Carter, who left last year. So that search is actively ongoing. And of interest is that Heather Darby is the chair for that search committee. I know we'll find a good replacement very, very shortly. So, you know, for those two people who actually left, we have 3 coming in. We expect that these are going to be high quality, high caliber people. Already our agronomy person, Abby, in Middlebury, is already doing great things. And the Champlain Valley Coalition, Farmer Coalition, is really, you know, giving me great feedback on her. We have active interest in community development, and we've hired a new faculty who is actually in the Brattleboro Extension Office.
They work with Vern down there.
They will be in the same office doing community development work. Because community development is rural development. We want to make sure that those things are aligned and understood. And we have one new community development faculty search that's also going on. And these hires that I'm talking about, these faculty hires, in forestry also, community development have been first faculty hires in extension since 2014.
Yeah,
Which is
that's hard to believe, isn't it?
Got a new team in town.
So some grants highlights, because grants are helpful to kind of fill in that gap. We can't depend exclusively on grants, because you will understand that if we bring in $20 million worth of grants and hire staff extension, what happens is if the grant goes away, people go away. So we have to be very careful about that. But at the same time, we want to bring these monies in. And so our base funding, supporting that is always a good idea. So we have to keep that in the back of our minds. And so the Ag CWIP grant, we've acquired that again this year. And that's the Agriculture Clean Water Initiative Program. We have the Northeast Dairy Business Innovation Center grants that have also started or restarted. We have more monies in ACER funding. ACER is Maple. And also we have monies from the Vermont Department of Health, from Vermont Creamery, IMPI on that. We also have funding for 4-H youth, and Margaret Skinner on the tick issue. Just received notice, and shush about this, don't tell anyone, but we just received notice of a $2 million grant for Margaret to actually develop and broaden the tick research that she's been working on. But I'm not saying much about that. Just a little special report on the Northeast. UVM Extension has hosted Northeast SARE for several years. Northeast SARE, which is a Sustainable Agriculture Research Education Program, brings funding in from the USDA and then provides some funding to farmers and others. And the notes and narrative that I provided, Linda, has spelled this out. So I not going to spend a lot of time on this, but we're required to apply for host institution every 5 years. And we were just invited by the USDA to our interview. So we're going to be going there. And by the way, the Vice President for Research has agreed to actually attend that interview with us. This is a very important institution, Northeast SARE. We have great impact, as this is showing you. We bring in tons of money, not just into UVM, but regionally, so that we expand our influence beyond UVM and beyond the state. And we are very, very hopeful that not only are we going to be hosts for the next 5 years, but for the next 10 years, which is what the USDA has promised. If we rehost again, it's going to be more than 5 years. And this will probably outlive Vern Grubinger, but we're positioning ourselves to be in a great state, great position on all of these issues in the next few years. So thank you. That's my extension.
Well, it sounds like you're rolling along better than sometimes we've heard in the past. Getting some new people, filling vacancies, and I know, you do much more than work with ag people. You help whole communities and regions, which is, we're getting less and less ag people all the time. I don't know, eventually if that's gonna level out so we can feed ourselves, or we're gonna have to import food from those folks that we taught how to grow potatoes, maybe.
We continue to be innovative in extension, and certainly the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. And so we need a good mix of staff to get work done, researchers, and teachers, so that we can do all the things we need to do. But at the same time, our extension folk are kind of branching out across the state and doing work in other ways that benefits the university and the state. For example, I know you were quoted in 7 days article about milk. I'm pleased to announce that I was recently appointed to the Milk Commission by the governor. So these things actually come to position extension, to influence change, and to assist with the innovations that we need to come up with ideas around how to get things done, how to change the trajectory toward, from where it has been towards something that's more successful.
Well, that's, so you got appointed to the Milk Commission?
I have been.
Holy smokes, that's good news.
Congrats.
Yeah, yeah. No, so are there other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not a question. I go back quite a ways with the Extension Service. I worked in radio in Rutland for many years, and I can remember if you did the morning show, you used to get a little reel-to-reel tape from the extension agent. Bill Corey was the name that comes to mind. And it would be about a 5 or 10 minute program that you'd play every morning for the farmers who were listening with tips for the farmers and stuff.
Interesting.
Yeah. So anyway, great work. I'm curious about the maple. We're the leader. What more is anticipated doing? Do we get more land devoted to it? In other words, more farmers, or does the quality go up? How do we continue to sort of let it grow?
So I think one of the constraints that I've recognized, I've been talking to our maple specialist, Margaret Isler, about this, is that we need a stronger, larger team for maple work or maple outreach. So we have the research, certainly we have the teaching, but we need a strong team. Our team so far, our maple team so far, in terms of technical assistance in the state of Vermont, is one person.
Oh.
And we got I think 0.1 FTE, which is what is 0.1 FTE, like 5 hours or less than that, from the
Oh, it's 0.1.
yes, from the Agency of Agriculture. I know there's some funding that the Secretary of Ag has promised around that, so we'll see how that goes. But we need to kind of beef up, to borrow a term from the cattle industry, beef up our maple technical assistance work. And that's one of the things that I'm beginning to work on with our team at the Proctor Center, as well as Islohar.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
We do over 50%
Yeah.
nationwide of the total.
Right.
We produce over half of.
That's
in the country.
huge.
This might be a tough year with I don't think we've been below zero the whole winter that I can remember. And we actually went the other way for a couple of weeks, and the trees must have said, hey, I guess it's time to do the work, and then we shut them down again. So this is probably gonna be a tough year, maybe for maple, I don't know.
We'll see.
Trees are pretty resilient.
You never know until spring.
That's true.
Yeah.
All depends on how the weather comes out.
Yeah. And, so any.
No, it's great.
Irene?
I have another question. I realize we're at time here. I spent a lot of time yesterday afternoon talking to farmers and neighbors of farmers about this idea of human waste being spread onto soil for nutrients.
Mhm.
And I saw that you have a soil quality and water quality outreach. Is that a person, or are they two different people, or who, if I want to pursue that, who's the person?
There are a number of people working in soil health.
Okay.
So depending on what aspect of soil health you're looking at, there may be different people to call.
Okay.
Josh Faulkner is one, in extension, Heather Darby is also the other.
Okay.
And there are other people within the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences that you could call on. Because it's broad, the issue is broad, it's not just unidimensional. And there are different schools of thought on the issues that you hear about. So more research is to actually happen in that regard. We need to understand waste and understand the impact of waste on leaching and leachates into water systems and so on. We need to understand better. And depending on where you are in the world, things happen differently. The dynamics in the soil, in the atmosphere are different. And so that's why we need more faculty, to research faculty, to do more concentrated work on issues like that. But there's always an issue of money to do this or that. And sometimes there's some things that appear to be more important.
Where does Jeff work out of?
Where does,
Jeff Carter, where does he work?
Where does he work out of, Jeff?
Jeff Carter is now retired. He was in the Middlebury office.
Okay. So Heather up in Albert,
She's our soil.
Grand Isle, she'd be good to talk with, Irene.
Thank you.
She's responsible or has done a lot of nutrient management plans and all that, so she could give you.
I would also suggest you to send an email to me,
Okay.
probably copy it to Leslie, and we will figure it out and get a response right back to you from the right.
Appreciate
Do you have a card? We'll
Um,
find you.
We'll find you.
I don't think I got.
That,
Let me
that
check.
issue is a big issue over in Maine.
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
It blew up for
I have
last
cards.
year.
They had put a moratorium on it, didn't they, Bobby?
Yeah.
And then people was like, where are you gonna send it? Because we thought about that at one point, our legislature, same kind of thing.
It was so bad on this one farm
Thanks.
that it went through the animal
Mhm.
and into the milk.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And they had to butcher or slaughter the animals. The feed was no good and the ground was no good that grew the feed because it was full of heavy metals and
Yep.
and all kinds of things. So we ought to discourage as much of that human waste or septic, not septic, but municipal facilities from spreading that dry waste on farm fields. And if the state wants it spread, they can spread it on state land. We don't need it on our private. land.
So where are we now, so to start in terms of world population, over 8 billion?
Yes.
Do you realize that this problem is not gonna go away? We have to
No.
figure out something to do with it. And making energy might be one thing, and there's so many other things that we possibly think about. But it's an issue that's not gonna go away. We just need to understand it and solve it.
Yeah. Well, that's a project you could take on. That would help most every community, yeah. So, no,
So,
Thank you.
thanks very much.
yeah,
Appreciate it.
it was very.
I was gonna say, you have some cards of mine there, I was passing them around, but if you wanna pass it.
Oh, did you get one, Rich?
No.
Brian? There we go. Well, it was a very interesting presentation.
Thank
Keep
you
up
for
the
having
good
us.
work.
We're gonna get you out to visit some of our facilities, that's what let's do.
Yes, we'll have Linda put that on our late April or May schedule.
Sounds good,
Right, okay.
thank you
Yeah.
so much for having us.
Linda also has her contact. She has her email contact.
Very good. Good seeing you, again.
Thank you.
Morning, folks.
Good morning.
How are ya?
You ready for us?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we're actually not bad on our schedule. Usually we're, a half hour off. or something.
Looks good.
We're pretty
we'll keep you on time, Bobby.
Yeah,
We're usually
but
pretty.
your work will be cut out for you. Um,
So Linda, do you project from over there or do I need to do something? Okay,
So you just need to kind of guide me through when you want to.
all right, so we'll just tell you when it's time to advance.
Are you ready to start now?
Oh, I don't know, we're still waiting for
Okay.
Senator
Well, you
Campion.
could- Well,
Introductions.
Alan,
Bye, everyone.
you could blow them up big time on the screen. Because we're live, we want people, you want people.
Could be
to
all
know
over
you're
all over the
here.
state, all over the country.
Well, so you haven't met everybody, so we'll run around the room quickly and introduce ourselves.
Brian Collmore, representing the Rutland District.
Irene Runner representing Chittenden North, which includes Fairfax and Franklin County.
Good to meet you.
Brian Collmore, Campion.
Campion.
Well, we have
Nick
two
Collimore's
Brians.
there.
Brian Campion is in here, he'll be back shortly.
I'm Rich Weston, Webb.
And I think you know me, Bobby Star, so, we spent quite a lot of time together over the years on
have.
different projects.
We have.
And, so it's really, good to have you folks in and give us sort of an overview of things that you worked on and where you see us going or what we can do to make things better for the projects that you do and we just have a discussion in regards to all that good stuff. Yeah.
That's great. And so my name is Abby White. I'm the Vice President for Engagement at the Vermont Land Trust, and this is my colleague.
I'm Al Carnetz, and my role is I work on the farm projects, all the farm conservation projects in the Champlain Valley. So Addison County up through Franklin, Chittenden, Grand Isle, a little bit of Moyle County as well. So I get into Cambridge and Stowe and that area. So
You
and I've been
go
doing
all
that
the way
for-
up through Franklin?
Yeah, all the way Canadian border down to Orwell.
Oh, goodness, long haul. Yeah, got some good farmland.
Indeed. Some of the best we've got, for sure. But yeah, I've been, well, as you know, Bobby, I haven't been doing this as long as you've been in the Senate, but 25 plus years anyway.
Yeah, we must be running a little bit close.
Yeah. So Al just has not only is he the VLT internal historian, a little bit of fact, but Al just knows, I think, every plot of farmland in his territory. And it's a real treat to travel around the state with Al, and he just says, oh, this is owned by this person, and this is their uncle, but then they sold it to this person, and they came in from out of state. It's like it's a beautiful experience. So it's a real treat to just be here, and we hope it's as much of a conversation and dialogue with all of you as anything else.
Yeah, it's never really your farm. It's the person's that you bought it from's farm. It doesn't become your
That's
farm
right.
until a couple sales later.
Yeah,
Kind of like neighborhood watch. Exactly.
A couple of generations.
A couple of generations, not even sales, exactly.
it does go that way though.
Yeah.
Up home, out of Troy, we used to have the Coben farm. And it's turned over a couple of times. It's still called the Coben farm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So anyways.
All right,
Yeah.
so we'll get
We'll
started.
get started and if we have to run over a bit, but we'll work it out.
I don't think we even had a whole 45, and whatever, we're here as much to answer your questions and to just have a discussion.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I'll do just the overview piece of it and hand it over to Al to get deeper into agriculture and just interrupt at any point. So the next slide, Linda, I wanted to just put up here our purpose, and it's evolved as the Land Trust has evolved. So rooted in Vermont since 1977, the Vermont Land Trust helps people protect, care for, and connect to the home we share. And so there's really three important parts of our mission. Land conservation, which has always been key, protecting land from a development with focus on working lands, farmland, and forest land, also community lands. In addition to protecting land, we also help people attend to its ongoing health. It's not, the land continues to exist after it's been protected, and it's important that that ecological health be sustained and improved over time. So there's a whole set of services that we offer in that area, which Al will speak to when we get into some of the examples. And then finally, connecting to the home we share. We endeavor to serve every person in the state of Vermont and people who come to visit Vermont. But there's only a small percentage of people that will ever own a farm or own a large tract of forest land. But it's important that everybody benefit from the conservation that we have done and will continue to do. And so a big piece of our work now is learning, education, and connecting communities to place. There's a few properties that we own in Vermont, and that's also a little bit different for a land trust. Land trusts tend to just kind of conserve the land and then hold the conservation easement. but we actually own some parcels and are working with communities to invest on community gardens, trails, other programming. And that's an area that's new for us, that is kind of emerging as well. So I think it's just important to level set that there's a few different things that we do, not just protection, that we're gonna kind of dive into that deeply here. You know, another way to think about this too is our focus areas. And so there's really four. Forest land. And so the work we're doing there is helping to advance healthy ecosystems and habitat. A lot of the land, most of the land is managed for timber. That continues to be important. And then there's, as we also know, just tremendous climate benefits that forest land offer. And our work there is to, in partnership with other organizations, including the state, is to conserve large tracts of land. And this is important for biodiversity and climate resilience as well. As our region continues to change, we have to make sure that there are corridors for animals to travel as they're migrating to their new homes.
Yeah, does the land trust own any of this forest land, or you just bought the easements on forest?
We do.
We do own some of that Atlas lands up in, Bakersfield and, Franklin County. And we've been selling off pieces of it over time, but we bought 26,000 acres from Atlas
Wait,
Timber.
yes, that's right.
And with the Nature Conservancy. And so we've been slowly, when we sell it, we have an easement on it. But we still own a fair bit of some of that forest
But
land.
that forest is all active forest land that harvested when stuff gets ready to be harvested.
Exactly, yeah, yep. And that's part of our core mission, is working lands.
Yeah.
I mean, generally, we're quite different from the Nature Conservancy, where theirs is preserved more or less no touch, where we may have some of those areas within our easements, but generally they're still enrolled in current use. They have a forest management plan, and they have to follow that forest management plan.
Yeah.
So another focus area for us is water. And this has been, I would say, more prominent for us over the past 5 or 10 years. There's been more resources made available through DEC. And so we've become a close partner in advancing clean water, particularly on farms. And of course, the benefits there are just the clean water itself for the entire watershed, but also ecosystems, local ecosystems, habitat, and of course, climate resilience. We all know the importance of being able to manage for major flood events, storm events, and having waterways that are where the river can meander and there is healthy wetland for it to flow into. This all benefits us as a state and communities. And Al will give an example a little bit later of some, like what that looks like on the ground. Farms, that's really one of the things we're here to talk about. The ag
committee?
Yeah, yeah.
Imagine, yes.
I mean, unless you want to talk about, we can talk about anything else too. But conservation is one tool that's available to help farms remain financially viable. And so when a farm is conserved, the value of that land goes down. It becomes more affordable to the next purchaser. It frees up capital. If it's not going to transfer, it frees up capital for that farmer to invest in paying down debt or making other investments. And so conservation has been a really important tool to ensuring affordability. There's more that we do there, more of an active role that we play in farm transitions, and Al will talk more about that. And then of course, after we conserve a piece of property, there's often this ongoing relationship that we have with the farmer where we'll do kind of multiple projects, and we might come back kind of with second layer protections for water. We might do some additional projects on the land. We have a pretty robust and growing volunteer program. So there's additional work that we're doing in partnership with the landowners beyond just the initial conservation. And then finally, I talked a little bit about this with community, but you know, all of the easements that we have today have a provision for public access that could be maybe not universal, but it could be distributed public access, which is something like hunting, or it could be you know, access to trails in open spaces. That's an important part of our work right now. With towns, we've conserved maybe 30 community forests. Does that number sound
Yeah,
right?
I think so.
Around 30
Something like that.
community forests, and those are all often, you know, actively timbered. Are actively logged. There's often trail networks there, and there's just kind of other community activity. There could be maple
Swimming
out-
holes, sledding hills, I think of Casey's Hill in Jericho or Cambridge, I'm sure. I'm looking at you, Rich.
Casey's Hills
Casey-
and Underhill.
Is it Underhill? See, I was getting close, but you're right. I mean, those are the kind of community projects that we were
Didn't you
involved with.
do one at the Dunn property? Would you let folks in on that right up next to the Canadian border where it hooks the trail in with the Quebec?
Right in Swanton. Yes, right along the lake there. Yes. We were very involved in that. Gil Livingston at the time, our president, really helped spearhead that whole program because they gave us a timeline to act because there was a death in the family or the estate. And they said, we're going to give you like a month to figure this out. Otherwise, we're just going to put it on the market. So they came to us because we were probably the more nimble organization that could put something into action that quickly.
That was a great save there, you know.
Yeah, that's a spectacular piece.
Yeah. Is that hooks trails in Vermont right to Quebec trails, so you can, you know, meander up through and it's really pretty nice.
Well, I thought you were gonna say the Bluffside Farm in Newport.
Well,
That's
that
another one.
too. I mean, you know, it's made a big difference up north, because we would have lost that whole bluff area.
Right.
If we hadn't have gotten that, you guys hadn't have picked up that Scott.
Right,
Yeah. No, we've got, you know, the people, our children and their children, and they're, you know, it'll go for generations being open to the public, where those things, once they're gone private, they don't usually like sharing too well.
and then, you know, there's this economic benefit as well, tapping into the recreation-based economy.
Yeah.
There's a lot of trails on conserved land.
Yeah.
And, you know, folks like Kingdom Trails, they're an economic engine in that region, and we're a close partner with them. So I think that's it kind of on this slide. As I mentioned earlier, also, we have many different like learning opportunities for people to get out on the land, to attend virtual events, to learn about tree identification, you know, things in their own backyards. And then finally, this I just want to make one more point about some of the partnerships that we have among in communities of marginalized and oppressed people. And we work with the 4 different bands of the Abenaki on conservation land, Black-owned farmer or Black-owned farms and owners of those farms. And so there's just an important piece that we have identified to really expand who has access to land and who can really own land. So we can go deeper into that later. But on
Just a
this
quick
slide,
question, Bobby. I'm just wondering what's the smallest sort of parcel that you might be interested in? If somebody is, you know, let's say they have an historic home on 1 acre or 2 acre, you know, what's the smallest?
The smallest farm project
Yeah.
that I've done, I mean, Casey's Hill may be an exception, which was a community sledding hill.
Yeah,
It was, I can't remember the acres, but it's pretty small, probably between 5 and 10 acres.
okay.
But if there's a strong community benefit, we'll go to that size. But from a farm point of view, it's usually the smallest I've worked on is around 20 acres. And that was a satellite piece next to a working vegetable farm in Huntington. And so there needs to be like that farm component to it.
But you do some non-farm.
We do some
Right.
non-farms.
So what's that size?
Those can be pretty small.
Yeah. That's what I-
Those can be really small.
Yeah.
Those can be an acre or two, I
Yeah.
suppose. Yep.
Yes, there's still hope for you to be a farmer. So you.
I gotta take that class, the UVM one.
The interesting.
You're gonna need more than 8 weeks.
That 1977, when the land trust got started, in 78 and 9 is when we got the current use program going. And, it all kind of blended together as we move over the years. And Henry Karst, you remember him?
Oh, yeah, and yep,
He
we
was,
conserved some of the karst property in Heinsberg
yeah,
and Huntington.
and he was big on that forestry side and got that current use stuff going to track with these purchases. And then a few years after that, I think maybe in 80 or 81, we changed the ag. We got the ag more involved in it, farmland, and on current use, and it's really grown well together.
Oh, I think the current use program is a foundation of conservation, really. I mean, we dovetail well with the
Yeah.
current use, but without current use, I think that's the higher, the piece that's keeping a lot of, I don't need to explain this to you.
Right.
I just think it's keeping so much land open, beyond, so much beyond what we do.
Yeah, it's worked. It's two good programs working hand in hand.
Yep.
So,
So just briefly on this slide, 11% of Vermont has been conserved by the Vermont Land Trust, and so that's over 620,000 acres. And compared to, we're not acreage wise, that, we're small compared to other states, but percentage wise, I don't know if there's anyone who's done more than Vermont. So we've really made a strong commitment, and the presence of the HCD over most of our lifetime has really been another core reason, in addition to, current use, another reason why Vermont has been such a leader in this area.
that's pretty good, though.
It is good, and it's there's more work to be done. But I'll say it's also one of the reasons that we have now these other areas of work, improving the health of what's been conserved already is critically important. Ensuring that it remains, financially viable, also critically important. And that people are, all Vermonters can connect in and benefit from what we've done.
Do you know how many of the 620,000 are ag lands, tillable lands that we've got kind of set aside to support family foods down the road?
Yeah, I have a data point. It's in another slide coming that describes the number of acres of ag land conserved. I think one of the challenges is we don't have great data on what's happening on those lands always. So just because a farm has been conserved, of course, the intent and the supports are to keep it in production, but it's changing all the time.
Well,
But very little of that land, I would say, that we've conserved is abandoned. I mean, I would
Yeah.
say by and large, 90,
it's always,
95, whatever percent. If it's abandoned, it's often in because it's in flux of ownership and they've lost the renter or something, but yeah.
but it's always gonna be good ag land.
Yep.
And,
Yeah.
it may not be used for pasturing animals.
Right.
It could be used to grow food. And for the long haul, I think we should be thinking about that to pass on to the next generation, or a couple and down the road. Cause, you know, it isn't always gonna be nice out in California. I mean, we've seen thousands of acres with cracks that wide in it from the drought. And,
Well, I would draw your attention to the map there too, Bobby and others. I mean, those green areas, like you can see Addison, Franklin, up in the Northeast Kingdom, those are where we've established some pretty impressive blocks of interconnected, there's blocks of 5,000 and 6,000 acres of farmland in consecutive.
Does that 11% include federal land?
No,
No, good. So that's only what you all
that's
have.
only Vermont
Okay,
Land Trust
great.
held easements.
but that, forming those blocks is very important as well. You know, the tractors on the road and equipment on the road, it runs a lot easier if there's a lot of you than if there's just one of you in an area.
And also, if you go up to the Northeast Kingdom, you do start to see a little bit of the suburbanization. You know, you get 50 acres and next house is 100 acres, and that really blocks that, you know, or really prevents those blocks from coming together.
What's the best part of Vermont? Of course, people
They're gonna wanna live there, right?
There, remember
The
say
one
that
near Westman doesn't need to.
a quarter of that 620 is farm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Your website says 150.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, that's good.
Just a couple other points here is the stewardship. And so these are, 2,300 and growing easements that need to be, that we steward. And then we need to ensure remain intact. And so we strive not just to monitor and enforce, but also have a relationship. And I think that's where more work can and should be done. Because all of these landowners, that land is living and changing all the time. And we have an obligation here. And then just finally, their revenue, I think just important to give you a sense of scale. It's a big number for a nonprofit of 46 people, but 90% of that is flowing through kind of direct to purchase development rights or other just like direct services on the land. So that money is, off in the case of conservation, flowing through us. We do the transaction, the legal transaction, which is quite a bit of work. Do the work through VHCB in that process, which Al leads for his region. But then as the money comes to us in the purchase of development rights, it kind of flows back out.
So now we're reaching a place where there's the next generation, and I'm asking this because what I've seen in my area is people sold development rights, and now just for agricultural reasons, I'm seeing agricultural land that don't have development rights selling for $3,500 to $5,000 an acre. And I've got young farmers that are coming along in the next generation on that, and it's conserved and they can't compete. What's the thought about going forward? Because I look at it and it's the same thing happening in the rest of our agriculture here. It's all becoming the big, huge people that are able to afford it. There's no small farms left. We're losing all of our small farms. Those small farms I'm only saying in my view, they're the ones that put cattle on the hillside that we see as our picture of Vermont in our mind. And the bigger farms are making it, but everything else is falling by the wayside. What's the thinking, the talk, where are we headed, what are we doing? where are we with that?
Do you want to take it?
Well, I mean,
Like, you-
I share some of those same concerns and, you know, all around Vermont, there's those micro markets. I call them micro real estate markets. Where there's a few big farms competing against that land. And yes, I agree, we've conserved it. Maybe it's a little less price, you know, it's a little bit more affordable, but the bigger farms, I see it in Franklin County a lot. You know, where the bigger farms are taking that land at a pretty high price, even after it's conserved.
Yep,
And on
I just
occasion,
watched a 35-acre piece. I
that's
was,
over 3,000 an acre, maybe.
was almost 5,000.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I mean, I can picture, but I can tell you, we probably are both talking about the same piece of land. And I mean, it does also speak to the success of agriculture, that they're willing to buy a piece of land that can't be developed for agriculture. But you're right,
But it's a different view.
but it's a
in
different view, I agree.
And it's only that handful of very large farms
They can afford to.
that can afford to do that.
Yeah.
They're the ones buying combines at $600,000-700,000. And for anybody to have a 50 or 75 acre piece and try to put something together, what do we want to be?
It's a fair question. I mean, I can speak to a couple of cases where we have done some of those things. What you're talking about is post-conservation, you know, after it's conserved. How do we step in? We do have this, we can get into this. I know
Well,
your clock is ticking here, but we do have this option to purchase at agricultural value restriction that's built into the easement. Takes a little while to explain, but that doesn't apply to if the agricultural value is $5,000 or $4,000 an acre.
I
Then
think
we're
the
just letting the
average-
marketplace,
I think the average along where I am is more like 3,500.
3,500.
But, right, and 33 to 3,500.
Yeah.
But if you're young, there's no chance. And did we do this just so floodplain, which this mostly is a lot of floodplain, did we do all of this so that floodplain could be protected, so the very large producers could do that? And is that what we envisioned? And I want to see it continue to be farmed. But I somewhat look at that. I have a 24-year-old who works for one of the farmers that is quite close to me and moved on to what's left of our farm, and I put an Airbnb in the farmhouse, and he's kind of caretaker there, but runs the big combine for them. He envisions himself someday as wanting to be in the business. I don't know how he would ever compete.
Have to sell that combine.
Well, the combine is owned by.
Is owned by the
The
farmer that
big
he's
farmer that he, you know.
Yeah.
And is that what we envisioned?
Well,
And is there a next generation in this that we need to think about more?
I think there is.
Yeah,
And that's some of our focus that we can get into a little bit too. And some of our shifting focus, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah,
and I think you're just pointing to some of the just inherent drawbacks in conservation. It's one tool and.
Well, I don't
it's
see it as a
really-
drawback. I don't see it as a drawback. I just think we've got to a point, maybe we got to refine what our thinking is and what's the next generation.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And
May I
we
ask you a
are-
quick question also? If you want to finish that thought first.
I was going to add that we are seeing, farms are changing and uses on farms are changing. And yes, we're seeing consolidation in dairy, but we're seeing smaller farms in vegetables and other kind of ag products. So we're seeing more diversification, at least within kind of our portfolio of farms that are conserved and also smaller plots. And so I think there's the future farmer is as a different profile than the person who's, you know, the legacy farmer.
Do you see many on-farm accessory businesses going on farms that you control?
Yeah, quite a few, actually, and our easement is somewhat flexible in allowing, you know, call it Airbnbs or bed and breakfast, but also things, you know, people hold wedding events,
Right.
things like ag tourism pieces
Yeah.
on farms a lot more and more. I mean, obviously, they're looking for ways to
Keep it going.
keep it going.
We're gonna need CLF, I mean, we support that type of
Yep.
on-farm businesses. But CLF, they don't wanna see any of that happening, you know. They've got a lot of problems with on-farm businesses, and so,
Well, I know you're dealing with that in zoning and
Yeah,
local
we're-
ag zoning, et cetera. I mean,
Yeah.
our easements kind of mirror a lot of what zoning says, but, you know, they can build up structures, but not specifically for a banquet hall, you know?
Do you accomplish a lot more if you had a lot more money, or is a lot of this relationship building, or is it a combination, you know, because if all of a sudden somebody dumped a pile on you guys, is it really, you still have to form the relationship? It's not as though the land is ready to purchase right now, or are there a lot of plots that are ready to purchase and lack of funds are holding you back?
Well, we're kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but I'll kind
It's a
of answer
very
this
smart
question.
idea.
You guys, yeah. So what we're doing right now to support farm transfers,
Yeah,
when a farm comes for, you know, for many years now, for 10 or 15 years, we have like a farmland access approach. When a farm comes available, we'll purchase it, conserve it,
Mhm.
sell it at the conserved value to a beginning farmer, right? Or
Okay.
a new farmer, a new owner of land. You know, we have a competitive process for that to really vet to make sure that they have a strong business plan, we get them connected to services. What we've learned over time is that those transactions can happen, to be successful, it might need to happen over 3 to 5 years,
yeah,
right? We might need to own that land, bring a farmer on, lease that land to the farmer, give the farmer time to build up their business to be profitable, whereby then they can become the owner. And so that is all very capital intensive. Right now, we're doing that with we have a portfolio of maybe 10 farms, but it would be excellent if we could scale that up to 30 farms, right? And then that becomes one of that pathway in for the next generation of farmer that doesn't have the capital to buy even, you know, a parcel at conserved value, but can get into a lease situation with us, grow their business, and then take it on over time. So that's an area of work that we're doing where, yes, I think additional resources could be very helpful.
Yeah, and the other piece of it is, especially when farms are in transition, as you mentioned, you know, there's a time urgency. And right now it's almost a two-year waiting list. Somebody calls me up and says, I'm interested in conservation. I say, well, we're looking 2025. You know, to get money out the door, and some of it is through federal grants as well. And so oftentimes when there's a transition when people hear 2025, they think, really? You know, there's that long of a waiting list, it takes that long. And sometimes so as Abby mentioned, property in Moncton, and this is great. I'd rather talk to you than talk to the slides and answer your questions, but we did exactly that where a woman ran a berry farm for years, and she had already subdivided off some lots, and we had caught wind of it, and she said, well, I'll give you guys 6 months. I'm not going to wait 2 years to bring conservation money to the table. And we bought it. We just stepped in. We bought a 100-acre farm in Moncton. She had a profitable business. We put out a request for proposals. We found a buyer, but they couldn't step in to run it either right away. They had 2 Jamaicans that were working there for 20 years that mostly ran the farm. They stayed on. They rented it from us for an entire year.
Oh my gosh, great story.
But if we hadn't been there to jump in to to buy it at that time, at that moment in time, it probably would have been subdivided and lost. So that's a success story.
Yeah,
I
that's a
don't
great
mean
story.
to, it's like my father, falling and breaking his hip, and we had to sell the cows. You were not an option.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Anyway. But I'd rather
Yeah,
answer your questions than go
Yeah, no,
to the
that's-
so
slides.
this is great. So I'm just trying to kind of jump around here. Linda,
Sure.
just the next slide. This is just some results from 2022. We'll get into more storytelling, but so, 13,500 acres protected last year. We're stewarding, again, the amount that I mentioned before. That includes 15 farms that were protected, 35 miles of streams, and 300 plus acres of wetlands. A lot of those on farms. There's produce that we grow on farms that VLT owns, and we have partnerships with local food shelves, organizations, the food bank. They're also, profitable.
Food Bank
commercial.
told us they purchased 2.3 million, I think it was, foods from Vermont farmers.
Yeah,
So that's quite a few bushel of something.
there's a great project we've been doing with the food bank at our Pine Island Community Farm in Colchester with goats. And we have a Bhutanese farmer there who runs it's called Durali Family Goats right now, serves the market of new Americans and kind of looking for goat meat. And the food bank provided a grant to basically make those free. And so we partnered with them to provide that program, and it launched during the pandemic, and we've been able to keep it going. So the food bank has been an amazing partner.
Question that Brian over here raised several times, is is there any way we could take a farm and subdivide it, say 100 acre or 200 acre farm, and subdivide it to 10 different farmers to grow crops on? I think you raised that a few times, so that the farmer wouldn't have to wouldn't have to rent the whole thing for a dozen years to get enough equity to buy it. So they'd buy 10, each buy a section to do crops on. Is there?
Subdivision is hard. I mean, that's our primary restriction in
To
our
keep it-
easement is
Yeah.
to keep it connected. I mean, they could rent it to 10 different people. Have
Yeah,
a long-term lease
Long-term, 100
for
year
10
lease.
years. If you're talking about leasing 100 acres, a landowner, then that happens.
Oh, so you do allow the person that owns the farm to sublet
Absolutely.
section.
That's fair game. They can lease whatever they want to lease.
So does that answer your
Yeah,
question?
yeah, I think
Brian?
maybe you had it.
But
Yeah,
subdivision
yeah.
of actual subdivision and creating a separate parcel,
Right.
that's difficult.
Have you ever I haven't thought about this, sold to like a cooperative?
So, yes, I
Yeah.
mean, you're hitting on all of these areas that are very emerging and exciting, really. So if you're familiar at all with Earthkeep Farm, that's in Charlotte. It was started by Will Rapp, the late Will Rapp. That's on conserved land. That's an old Nordic farm.
Yeah.
And so the vision for that is kind of multiple enterprises on a single parcel of land, sharing buildings, sharing equipment. So there's a lot, there's things that are happening and the legal structures are in place to make it work. We're partnering with there's a farm in Tunbridge that we conserved that is being leased to a nonprofit, the White River Land Collaborative, that started up kind of in response to, remember when there was a landowner, they were gonna purchase like 23,000 acres.
Oh, and
to-
Sharon and
Yeah, to bring,
Cambridge, yeah,
Some
Joseph
sort of
Smith.
a community.
Yeah, like the
Oh,
Joseph
yeah,
Smith,
yeah,
you
right.
know.
yes. thank you.
So this,
Okay.
this group of people all came
Reaction to
together,
that.
kind of in reaction to that, to say, well, what do we want?
Oh, right, yes, okay.
What do we want? And then we had Conservative Farm there, and we were in conversations with them. And so now there's a community organization that's operating, and
They're all
they're
sort of
leasing.
in.
yeah, and
Is
they're
it like a
trying.
co-op like you see in New York or in a city kind of
Yeah,
thing?
kind of nascent.
Uh-huh.
They're trying to pull it together, but those efforts need resources. They need staff and people.
Interesting.
There's, I think I know there's one kind of veggie and meat operation there,
Mhm.
but they desire to have it grow, and bring in different partners.
Yeah, and I'm working with a property in Jericho right now, 50-acre farm. It's got a house, but it appraised at over 900,000, but it's a cooperative. They created their own LLC to buy it. But we're bringing in about $500,000 to buy it down to, conserve it, take away the development rights as part of it. So they're able to buy it for about 300.
Wow.
50 acres.
Yeah.
100 grand.
Yeah,
You couldn't even grow marijuana on that and make a profit.
Well, it does come with a house.
Linda, I think we can kind of skip to slide 7 and we get
Sure.
this Fletcher,
Yeah.
the Doyle family.
Yep.
Okay.
I was just gonna walk you through a couple of projects that have just recently been closed, and you may be familiar with them, I don't know, but just to kind of walk you through how a project progresses. And these people are good examples. Young farmers looking for farms, we're on a 15-acre piece up in Bakersfield, way up in the hills. And they heard about this property for sale in Fletcher. So we stepped in. We ended up purchasing the development rights from the King family. It was a transfer from the King family to the Doyles. It happened all at the same time. It's 180 acres. So they went from 15 acres to 180. A lot of it is, I have a map that I'll show you in a second, but I'll talk a little bit about the riparian protection that we put in on this property. They're running now a diversified chicken, pork, beef, and also sugar bush. And the easement was funded through VHCB and NRCS funds. And we can't say enough about the VHCB funds. But next slide, I'll just show you.
She was in the Tesla farm.
Yeah. That's right.
Why?
Exactly, Hannah Doyle. We brought her in, and this is the farm.
Beautiful.
There's, Mount Mansfield in the background, right on the Cambridge Fletcher Road. And they landed here. There's another map. I think next slide will show you a little bit of the map of the property.
So they bought it.
So they bought it.
They
They bought
bought
it for
it.
about half price. Through the easement purchase. And they came with a house and an old barn. What I wanted to show on this, and that's the whole sugar bush piece that they are tapping now, it's been pretty much an abandoned sugar bush. So they're putting it, they're new to sugaring, but they're putting in a sugar bush on that piece. And then there's also riparian protection. You see that little white strip in the middle.
Yep.
What we're doing now on pretty much all of our farm projects, anywhere where there's a perennial stream, we are going well beyond the RAPs, the required ag practices, which I think require 25 feet off from flowing waters. Our easements now have 50 feet on each side. Actually, I think the next slide actually shows you the stream. There's a close-up of the stream. I mean, this is sort of like a before. I don't have an after picture, but this is typical of what we see on these older. This is an old dairy farm, obviously, and there's this stream that runs through. You can see some of the slough off, the erosion that's going on that stream. So we have this last summer planted a whole bunch of willows and trees along this corridor. So there's a 50-foot setback. In this case, it's a 100-foot setback because it's 50 feet on each side. So this is pretty much standard. I mean, they are giving up cropland, no question.
They were a little, the Kings had an excavation company.
Well, it's a
So they-
ditch. It's a straight,
So they figured out a way to make it a ditch.
they totally ditched it, exactly.
How much land did the Kings keep?
Oh, the Kings didn't keep much at all. Just a little piece of somewhere their houses are up on that other road, the King Road, I guess it is.
Yeah,
That
the
dead end
King
road.
Road, I think they kept to the top of it.
Yeah, they kept to the top of that road, exactly. Yep. So I just pointed this out. Hopefully we can show a slide in a couple of years where that bank will be stabilized.
Mm.
And as Abby mentioned, we're going back to these farms that might not have had these restrictions 20 years ago about riparian protections, and there is funding, water quality funding, a combination of different funding that we're able to piece together, get trees out there, get our volunteers out there. We have these volunteer days where we have 5 or 10 people, or maybe more, out to
More.
plant 1,000 trees.
Yeah.
Wow,
We had the
that's great.
conservation folks in last week, I think it was, and I know Franklin County, they're
Yep.
planting little willows to get seedlings.
Right.
And they're doing.
Well, it's accelerating that, trying to keep those banks in place. But you're right, it was totally a ditch.
Yeah, Delmer had his son go
Yeah.
out and ditch it. I remember when they did.
Exactly. So those are some of the things that we're involved with because we have these long-term relationships with the farm.
Yeah.
And then the other one that I'll point out, I know our time is running. This is one that we did down in Pownell, where the Dodge farm, Sally Dodge and Will Dodge owned this farm right in Pownell for a long time. And this was another transfer. About half of my projects these days, and that's sort of our shifting focus, is being involved in the transfer of the property at the same time. And that's what we did on this property in Pownell. Sally in the middle there, and then Will, her son, owned it. They were ready to sell it. They had talked about developing, but then the Gardner farm, which is an organic dairy, that's Mark Gardner there to your right, was renting it for a long time. Couldn't afford the full price, clearly, at the time. So, and they generously actually did what we call a bargain sale. They didn't receive full fair market value for the easement. So that's a leverage that we bring to VHCB and NRCS. We leverage a lot of those VHCB funds with people like the Dodges. Now, it doesn't happen with your typical dairy farm because there's a lot of debt on the property, and the lenders and the farmers. I want to try to pay the farmers as much as we can, clearly. But in this case, they were willing to do what we call a bargain sale. And we also did some riparian protection and wetland protection on that one.
And when
And
they,
there's one last slide I think I have of the property. That's the piece in Pownell.
Gorgeous. Bennington County, everywhere you look, gorgeous.
Oh,
Competes with Northeast Kingdom,
It
right?
does.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did John Campbell help with this?
Yeah, It
their
happens to
valleys
be
are-
one down from looking at Mansfield.
their valleys down there are so narrow that you only have one road. When,
Yeah, but their hills aren't high enough to.
And Rich is right between you, in Cambridge.
That's right.
So,
when you have a person like the Dodgers that
yes.
sold their property at bargain sale, now are they able to use any of that money that they didn't get as a tax deduction?
Exactly. Yeah, thank you I omitted that piece, but you're right. It's IRS considers that a charitable deduction to a nonprofit, which is what we are. We're a 501c3. And, they have to get an appraiser to substantiate that value, but it might be as much as $100,000 that they're willing to, eat, essentially. It's not money in their pocket, but you're
No,
right.
no,
It's
but
money
they
that
can
can still
deduct,
work for them,
yeah.
for their property, for their income taxes.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's good.
Yep.
No,
But again, it's, when we can do that, that's fine. But when prices get really high, some in high real estate markets like Charlotte, Stowe, Shelburne, we may not be able to pay. The VHCB funds are limited, and we're trying to spread them around as much as we can. So in those markets, we often can't pay the full easement value. It might be $1 million, and we're saying, well, we've got to. I do about 10 projects a year. And overall, we do what, between 15 and 20. So we're trying to spread that money around.
Well, yeah, you kind of have to. If you're gonna keep those blocks of property growing a little
Yep.
bit. No, sounds like, so we got the little plots figured out, how to make that work. No, that's a lot of property, that 11% of the property.
Yeah.
And,
But again, I think our focus, or at least my focus, is about those transfers, trying to figure out how to keep those young farmers. And Rich, your point is well taken. In some of those big farm parcels are still selling for a lot of money
Yeah,
after they're consumed. Maybe it's a little less, but not a lot less.
no, and it's on floodplain.
Right, right.
And,
Yeah.
you know, so
They're blocking out other,
I just think
I
it's a
don't
conversation.
know how to crack that nut.
Well, I just think it's a conversation we have to start thinking
Yeah.
about. What do we, Ryan's idea of, can we do more with collective ownership?
Yeah.
Between
Yeah.
more than, is there, because I'm not sure we did this all for agriculture here to become, and not that I want to discourage the big guys,
Right.
but, the 35 acres that went up for sale behind, I've got, some apartments. I got the land where the barn used to be in that, but behind it, there's a 35-acre piece. And it's a nice meadow, kind of sits alone. They just came in and just gobbled it right up. And there was no opportunity for anybody that was smaller that might look at that and say, I want to do a farm stand or something. They couldn't compete with this. And so my question really is, what's our future? And is it only to feed that kind of development? And I'm not sure.
well, we're getting plenty of money into housing, so,
Yeah.
Well, this will never be houses because it's floodplain.
I mean,
It's
these
what?
smaller cooperatively owned approaches, what we call alternative business models, that really is the future. They're a little bit more difficult. There's more complexity in making that work. Different types of resources that people need to be able to pull together those business structures. But we're seeing that here and there, and I think it's a great opportunity for growth.
I run that, Nick's leaving.
Yes, Nick, our president, he's leaving. His last day will be March 17th.
Yeah.
So
Well,
we will miss Nick.
yeah, because he's been
Yeah,
8-10 years, I think,
10
Yep.
years.
Last
Yeah.
name, Nick?
Richardson,
Richardson,
yes.
yeah. Well, that's kind of too bad, but
Yeah,
must be he's got something else that's bigger and better.
well, I think he's also just ready for a break.
Yes.
We've seen a few posts coming out of COVID, a desire to slow down, and
I mean,
so,
it's unreal
what?
COVID, it's
Yeah.
unreal, the problems COVID, the pressures that put on people.
I know,
You see it in
Yeah.
town government, state government, federal
we
government.
saw it here, I mean, in the
Yeah.
state
You guys are
house,
all more or less back to
a
normal.
lot
right?
of, well, just a
changes.
ton of transition.
Yeah, it
So-
took its toll.
Yeah.
And so anyways, we really,
Good.
Thank you
very
much.
Well,
Thank
Really
you.
great.
Good
Great
to see you or meet you.
Great to see you.
Yes.
and,
Thanks for having us.
if issues come up that you think we should know about, feel free to
Yeah,
contact us anytime.
yeah, we
Very good.
might be helpful on like the accessory on farm,
Yeah, we're gonna
Well,
need
when
some
that comes
help
up.
on that.
Yeah, we're definitely tracking that.
so we can
Okay.
speak to that.